Welcome to episode 3 of Screaming on the Inside. My name's Lee. I'm the admission supervisor for UCAT Treatment Centres. So this episode, we're very pleased to invite into the podcast the manager of our Sanctuary Lodge Rehab, Jenna Veerapen. Jenna has 15 years of experience working in the field of psychology. Jenna brings with her a wealth of experience and passion to the conversation. We're very pleased to have her here. This episode, Bridging the Gap, is understanding what needs to be done when somebody leaves treatment and returns home to the normal pattern of living. So thank you for joining me today, Jenna.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So today's going to be a little different to our previous podcast. So we've had ex-clients with us before who have discussed their experience of being in treatment and actually leaving and what it's like to lead a life clean. And you're coming from a different standpoint of being the manager of the centre and actually working with the client. So when clients come in with you, and it must be very daunting for them to actually enter the treatment centre and going through the process with you guys, when they leave treatment and go back to the normal life, what would be waiting from the outside? Why is it so important to have a recovery program in place when they leave treatment?
I think the reason why it's so important is what we try and teach them while they're in treatment is that this isn't a short-term thing. This isn't a 9 to 5 thing. This is for the rest of your life. So this is about changing kind of every aspect of your life to make sure that you're kind of the priority, because if you're the priority, you can then be there for other people. It just gives them a bit of structure, and that's the thing that they've missed before they come into treatment with us. Having a routine, having something in place that they know they can take 5 minutes out for themselves, and it doesn't have to be an hour, it doesn't have to be 3 hours, it can just be 5 minutes to ground themselves, check in with themselves most importantly, and then feel a bit more courage and strength to carry on again.
Yeah, no, of course. I think self-love is a very big part of recovery, and I like what you say about the small things, because I've heard it's not the mountains that trip you up in recovery, it's the molehills, and it really is like that. When clients are with you, they get a really good structure, don't they? So I know you're very structured within the rehab program. Moving out past that point, would a lot of them follow that structure? Would they develop their own coping strategies?
We kind of we have a template, and it's then for the individual, because everyone is an individual. Everyone is going out to different situations and different scenarios. It's then about trying to bring in that balance for them, because what might work for me is not necessarily going to work continuously going for someone else. Someone might need to go to 2 meetings a day, someone might need to go to 1 meeting a day. It depends on the rest of the things that they have. So we try and give them like a template to kind of work off and start planning how they can, so they're not living in the future, because we really do encourage them to stay in the day, but making a plan is also really important, so they know what tools they've got in their toolbox to kind of fall back on. Yeah,
it's very important. One of the things I suppose I've learned from my own personal recovery program and my journey in recovery is, in addiction, I lived in the past an awful lot. I had a lot of regrets around the past. I think a lot of people do when, by the time they get to the stage where they're coming into treatment and they're getting clean. But I also lived in the future a lot, so I had a lot of regrets around the past and worry about the future, and I'm in constant turmoil stuck between the two, and never really appreciated what was going on today. So one of the gifts for me most definitely has been the ability to live in the moment, right here and right now, because I can only stay clean today. I've only ever lived my life right in the moment, and being able to do that in recovery was certainly one of the biggest gifts that I've actually ever been given.
Yeah, and it is. You're absolutely right. In a lot of the ways that we describe it to clients, when you're living in the past, it's often depression. When you're living in the future, it's often anxiety. Neither one of them is going to give you anything that's rational. It all becomes irrational. So being in the present moment just allows you to kind of focus on actually what's in front of you, what you can control, rather than trying to look at things that you have no control over, people, places or things. So as much as you can have a plan, that's not always going to be 100% foolproof.
No, very true. Very true. And do you have any involvement with the alumni side of things when people leave treatment?
We do link people in, obviously, with the alumni, and we do promote that quite a lot because it is really important. And we've had some events here. We've had a Christmas party, and then there's been a few other events, obviously, before COVID came into play, where we just think it's really important to just have those events and normalise some things. We went to the Christmas party, obviously the year before last, and a lot of graduates were invited to that, and it was really, really interesting to see how people reacted really differently to it. They hadn't danced sober and clean, and they were nervous, and being around lots of people in an environment, and others were really enjoying that kind of just freedom to remember what was happening and be a part of it, and the belly laughter that didn't require having a substance in them.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing to see. It must be lovely for you as well, because you get to see them at the point of entry when they come, clients come into treatment, and then seeing the difference at something like a social event. It must be lovely for you to see.
Yeah, it is. It's a real privilege to be a part of that journey, because it's never plain sailing. And I remember someone saying to me once, you don't get a good sailor because they sail the smooth waters. A good sailor is someone that knows how to ride the waves and still survive. And that's a lot like people going through their addiction and their recovery. If it's plain sailing, something's not right, because that's just not life. It's full of ups and downs. There's good days, there's bad days, there's in-between days. And it can change minute to minute, so it's about living life on life's terms.
Yeah, I agree. I've spoken to people about this, because I always, I have difficult days the same as everybody else in recovery. And speaking to my sponsor, actually, and he says you grow through the difficult times. And it is so true. When everything's going well, I don't really need to do a lot in recovery. I'm able to stay clean and do okay. It's when things get more difficult and the water is a little choppy, I really have to put some action in, and they're the times that I do grow. In terms of, because I'm getting more coping mechanisms, I think, during them times. I'm getting more skills on what to do when the difficult times do arise. And what you say about life on life's terms is very true. Life is going to happen to people when they leave treatment, and they're going to need the tools to deal with it.
And it's really, really, really difficult to put a plan in place when you're in crisis. So we always talk to clients before they're leaving and kind of compare it to, wherever you go in a building, and they tell you about their fire evacuation procedure and, the green little man and, the fire door signs. And people know that's an automatic thing that's kind of built in, and it's about everyone having that kind of treatment recovery program in place, because if you save it for when you hit the crisis, you have about 2-3 seconds before you go into auto mode, and your normal reaction, which is probably to go and get substances, kicks into play. So you have about 2-3 seconds to change that decision process. So and that is not the time to be thinking, well, who's my emergency person that I call? Where's my go-to support network, or my safe place? Because it's not enough time. So having an emergency plan and memorising that emergency plan and having a list of, we've all had those scenarios, we all rely on our phones these days. None of us remember phone numbers, but having a list and having a hard copy list of names and numbers that says, 15 people at least.
So building up your recovery capital around you so you have that support there all the time.
Absolutely.
And it sort of really brings us on to our next point. So, a lot of discussion amongst the alumni. So let's start again. So there's a lot of discussion amongst the alumni guys about what's the best practice post-treatment to help keep someone recovered or recovering, depending on which way you look at it. What are some of the most effective actions someone can put into place to remain abstinent after leaving treatment?
For us, one of the main things that we do promote is the 12 steps. Going to a meeting is really, really important, and we hear it all the time that it's, I haven't got time today, or even on the same day that they're leaving treatment, I won't go to one tonight, because I've planned a takeaway with the family, and, and I've got all of these amends to make, and I really just want to catch up and spend some time with them. And it's like, so prior to coming into treatment, you could spend 20, 23 hours on your addiction, Now we're asking you to spend an hour, maybe 2, on a meeting, and it's become impossible. Yet that's the thing that will probably keep you connected to people, and connection is the best way to beat addiction. You're starting to come up with the excuses already, and it is just thinking about, is this worth your life? Because that's, for every addict, that's what they need to think about, those decisions. Is this worth my life, not going to a meeting? Is this worth my life, not picking up, because ultimately that's what can happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think in terms of you're very right. Addiction is chronic and progressive, and if left untreated, in a lot of people it is fatal. And if you said to somebody, you have cancer or some other life-threatening condition, and you have to go to your chemotherapy, your radiotherapy, you can bet they wouldn't miss it.
Yeah.
You can bet they would be there, they would turn up, and they would do what actually needed to be done to recover. And it is the same for myself in recovery. Now I look at, although a lot of our alumni team are 12-step, and I myself subscribe to a 12-step recovery model, there are other ways, but it is all the same, isn't it? Even Smart Recovery or other groups of that nature, it is one person who has been there helping another person. By myself, but most people by themselves are no good at all. I can't stay clean alone, but as a group of people supporting each other, we seem to be able to do it quite successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you have to remember, it's not an illness that you can see on the outside. It's not a physical disability that, it sits in someone's head, it sits in someone's brain, and it distorts their thinking. You can't see that. So that person alone, their thinking is not trustworthy, it's not reliable. Their best thinking is what's got them into treatment in the first place. And I always say to clients, it's not on your bucket list to come into treatment. It's not on anyone's bucket list to say they've gone into treatment. So it's about being open to other people that actually says, this isn't working. I need to check my thinking, and that means checking your thinking on the smallest things to the bigger decisions as well.
Yeah, you're very true. And it isn't on most people's bucket list. It really isn't. But rehab is that. Well, from what I see anyway, it's a new start for people. I used the phrase myself, reborn, and I'm not saying that in a religious context at all, because for me it was, I have my old life. It was very, very painful, and now I have a new life, which is, the majority is very good. I have the same struggles as everybody else living in the world, like you said, life on life's terms, but I still have a life where I'm free to do what I want to do and be what I want to be. Now, what would you say is some of the risks of not having any type of recovery program in place, or at least something to keep yourself healthy when you leave the treatment centre?
And the saddest case scenario, unfortunately, is death, because we see a lot of people coming into treatment on their knees in crisis, physically, mentally, emotionally beaten. They get a little bit of strength back, and then they pour that out to the rest of the world again instead of keeping it for themselves. So, some of the risks of not having that recovery program in place is them not prioritising themselves, is them not learning to look after themselves again, and think that they can, if they look after everyone else, they'll be okay, and it doesn't work that way.
Do you get that a lot in treatment, where people come in and they want to fixate on helping other people rather than looking at themselves?
Oh yeah, all the time. They, if they can help someone else, or rescue someone else, as we all often challenge them on, then that's okay, because but what all it does is give them ammunition to say that their problem isn't as bad as someone else's. And it's not about comparing traumas. It's not about comparing lives. It's about understanding that this is an illness that wants to kill you. And not care about you in the process, or who else it takes down with it, because it does take families down with it.
Yes, it does. It really does. It's funny, isn't it? Because the route of 12-step really is when you've been, working with a sponsor and you're going through the 12-step work and having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the program, you carry the message, and the purpose of it is for me to help the next guy that comes into the rooms, which I do now. But you have to be in a position where you can do that. So it also says you can't give away what you haven't got. And my first sponsor used to say to me, "You ain't got nothing I want, Lee." I quite like that about him, because I had nothing to give anyone, but I was there to take off people. When I did, I took what I needed off of everybody until I was in a position where I could help the next guy.
Isn't it? That, you know, people want to skip the steps. They want to go straight to step 8 and start making amends, and they've got nothing in their self-esteem tank. That person loses any little bit that they had in their self-esteem tank, and before they know it, they fall back on old behaviours. They fall back on old things that worked for them, because they think, well, what's the point? It becomes a lot of all or nothing thinking.
Yeah, that's very true. I like in rehab to sort of, because like you said, people are off course when they come in. They're very lost, and what I get from recovery is I get guided, and it's like a ship, and I can go. And for a lot of people, leaving treatment is going to be the start of them sort of going alone on that journey. Now, without the support of other people and a good recovery model, people can go off course. Now, if you go off course for a few hours, a day or so, it's quite easy to bring yourself back, but without the guidance of other people and some really strong recovery, you go off course for quite a long time. And if that happens over any period of time, and I've even noticed this in my own recovery, it's very hard for me to bring it back to where I need to be, and it takes an awful lot of work to do so.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like you said it before, and you know, we often use the analogy, you know, like when you're 1 day clean, 2 days clean, that's like having a 2-day-old baby. Would you put a 2-day-old baby in a pub? Would you put a two-day-old baby in front of a glass of wine? You know, because they're like, you know, I can't do this and I can't do that. But actually, you need to think of yourself like a newborn baby again, like being let out into the world and understanding. Yes, you may be in an adult body, but emotionally, you're still like a 2-day-old baby. And it is just thinking about it in that way to try and help people visualize things.
Yeah. And it's a really nice way of looking at it. I think I used to take offence when I was in early recovery at things like that. But then I think my sponsor said to me fairly recently, actually, you know, he says, you're 6 years old, and you're doing okay for a 6-year-old. And I sort of think, and I sort of understand it. I am, because before, my whole life, I had never learned to take responsibility. I'd never learned to deal with anything. My whole solution was taking a drink or a drug into my body to deal with anything. So learning them coping mechanisms is vital, and you get that foundation in, you know, in Sanctuary Lodge. You guys do an absolutely amazing job. And then you follow it up with lots of work when you leave treatment. And it really is that important. I always think it's very, you know, for a lot of people, that the treatment part is, you know, an easier part of recovery. You know, you guys, you look after people, you have a great team of therapists there, you're working on yourself all the time, but it's when you leave the centre, that's when the real action has to be put in.
Oh, absolutely. You know, for a lot of clients coming into treatment with us, it's their first healthy relationship with someone that's got boundaries, that's got, you know, care in there as well, but it's often their first healthy relationship that they've had with someone. And that's not through fault of anyone or even the client themselves. It's just sometimes that's life and that's situations, and they haven't been able to be true to themselves and be who they are. And they get that opportunity with us because there is no expectation, there is no hidden agenda. If you want to get what you want to get out of treatment, you need to put that in. That has to come from you. And we'll just be the vessel that supports that. And, you know, for a lot of us, we all have clients that we stay in touch with, that we still speak to regularly. You know, I've got clients going back, 4 years that's still in touch. I've got clients that have recently just left. The same with a lot of the rest of the team, because we still think it's really important, and they call us up on good days and bad days, or they call us up and they know they're calling us up because we're going to say, well, have you been to a meeting? What are you not doing? You know, and then they kind of go, yeah, I just needed to hear that from someone else. And now I'm going to go speak to my sponsor.
Yeah. So with what would you say, because obviously you've worked in the field for a very long time, what are the most common issues that you hear about that people are going to face when they return home, that they're having, you know, their concerns that they're going to have trouble dealing with when they leave treatment?
I think it's being in a relationship or lack of relationship.
Yeah.
It's work, and it's often a feeling of loneliness. We tend to get quite a lot as well. Even when they're going back home to families or relationships, they still feel lonely within themselves. They still feel that they need to be someone else. So and that's why it's so important to keep going to something like meetings and getting a sponsor and connecting with like-minded people, where it is okay to go and say, do you know what, I want to use today. It doesn't mean I'm going to, but I want to use today, and know that there's people will rally around you and support you and understand that. Whereas unfortunately sometimes if you go and say to a loved one, their reaction is going to be slightly different, because there's an emotional attachment, there's an emotional connection, and they're going to worry, and you're going to pick up on that worry and anxiety, and then you're going to feel guilty, and then you go into your own spiral, and then you just stop talking, and that's not healthy.
No. And I think the isolation, I don't know, you've probably heard it a lot in treatment, but I hear it an awful lot in recovery meetings, that you could be in a room full of people and still feel isolated in active addiction. And then coming into rehab and having that support, and having, aside from the therapist and the support staff and of course the management team that are there to support you, you have your peers in treatment, and you're all working towards that common goal, and then you leave, and I suppose what you say is right, you can fall back into that trap of isolation, which is why the support of people who have been there. And for me, the mutual aid support that people tap into has got to be the biggest form of support that you can actually get when you leave. Because if I try and speak to, and I have done once actually, Jenna, I spoke to my wife one night. I hadn't really been speaking to my sponsor a lot, and she said, I feel a little bit excluded from your life and from your recovery. So I spoke to her and told her how I was feeling, and she looked at me like I was insane. Absolutely, just like, what are you thinking like that, Paulie? It's like, okay, you don't understand. And I made a decision that night never to talk to her about my recovery again in that respect, because she doesn't understand. But if I speak to my sponsor and say, do you know what, I've got this stuff going on, and he says, do you know what, I felt like that as well, let's look at what you need to do to get around it. And it will break that isolation. I don't feel like that anymore. I'm not alone.
Yeah, and it's just really important. And if you think about it, regardless of whether you have addiction or not, everyone in their lives has groups of people for different things. You might have colleagues, and you might have associates, and then you've got friends that you like to go on holiday with, but you wouldn't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis, of people in our lives. And all this is for people in recovery and addiction is adding in one that involves going to 12-step meetings, or engaging in something like Smart Recovery, or alumni and the Facebook pages. That just means you can reach out to other people, so you're not so alone. It's just really, really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. And with, we live in very marvellous age, and we're very, very lucky to be able to tap into what we can tap into today. So the days we live in, we're very lucky to have so many different paths of recovery. I know Sanctuary Lodge itself offers a 12-step recovery model. In the north of the country, in Bradford and Runcorn, we actually offer the Strengths model and the 12-step recovery model. How important would you say it is that people respect other people's approaches to recovery, and how would you encourage a healthy debate without it blowing into a full-blown argument?
I think exactly that word that you kind of use, respect, isn't it? I think what we highlight to people coming into treatment is your way is not working. Your way does not work. And I think that's the first and most important thing. It's not working. It might work for a day, it might work for a week, but it's not working. Hence coming into treatment to need to have that safe environment to really take a step back. And I think what we always say, the beauty of the 12-step program is that all it asks is that you're open, honest, those kind of key things. And it's not saying that, this is just about trying something for for 28 days or however long you're in treatment, and if it doesn't work, then have you really lost anything more significant than you were losing before? But actually, what might you gain from this? And we do yes, we do follow a 12-step ethos here, but we're also quite balanced. We do understand that as amazing as the 12-step program is, it isn't for everyone. It doesn't work otherwise all the time. Otherwise, addiction wouldn't be a problem still. It comes down to human nature and human behaviour. We want to interpret things the way that we want it to be to fit with our lives, and that's not always the case. And I think, but what we try and do at Sanctuary is we balance that. You know, we have dialectical behaviour therapy, which provides, you know, active coping strategies and ways to regulate your emotions, and, you know, we have things like yoga and gong bath, because it is about a new way of life. It's not just about, right, well, I've got to do these. We always say, like, you're doing this program in order to live your life again, to go and do the things that you want to be able to do. So it's just kind of having that respect for each other that says, you know, we get a lot of clients that come in that are atheists and they don't like the God word being used. And you know, and that often comes up for debate, and we reiterate it's not a religious program, it's a spiritual thing. That can be, you know, there's lots of acronyms for God, and you know, your interpretation. For some people it helps them reconnect with a faith, and actually they find it comforting. For others, you know, it's a bit more of a challenge, but actually when you look at it a bit deeper, it's not about trying to focus in on one word, it's looking at what the message is that we're trying to get across.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about respecting other people's viewpoints. The root of 12-step recovery for me is, and I can only speak from my experience in this, is addiction made me very self-centered. I used to think that really, on some level, that the world owed me a living, and I used to think I was very sensitive. What I was self-seeking, and I internalized everything. And living like that, you can't possibly hope to live a healthy life. So 12-step recovery really is, when you look at the word God or the higher power as such, I learned in the beginning that it's just, you're not the center of the universe, Lee, which is why engaging with the group, helping other people, doing things for other people with no return for yourself, got me out of that mindset, got me out of that internalizing everything, selfish, self-seeking mindset, and got me into helping other people. And the root of 12-step is, for me, is to be a good person and treat other people as I'd want to be treated, and that's good enough.
You know, and that's really the kind of foundations of all our group sessions. You know, we're not asking you to connect and understand everything, but it is about being respectful and just listening to someone's experience, listening to someone's story, and seeing what does fit with you, and not all of it always will, but it's just about being open. You know, my favourite saying in the fellowship, there's a reason why you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Learn to close the mouth and learn to open your ears, because actually sometimes we do way too much talking, and we think we know best, and we want to finish people's conversations, and we want to have all the solutions and make people feel good. But actually sometimes all people are asking for us to do is just listen. You know, and a lot of clients don't always like that statement, but generally the ones that have the worst reaction to it are the ones that it fits the most, and they're the ones that come back a few days later and go, I get what you're saying now. It makes sense.
Yeah, and you're right in that respect, and we've touched on it quite a lot today. My thinking, the clients that come to us, their best thinking ends up with them in treatment, or, you know, if they're lucky to come to us, an addict's best thinking, because there's going to be a lot of people that aren't a part of our alumni program. Listen to this: addicts, alcoholics, their best thinking are getting them, you know, in a lot of trouble. It can, as you say, it can be fatal. So realizing that, for myself, I don't know best, and maybe there is someone out there that knows a little bit more than me that can help me. And one thing that they all have in common, whether it be, you know, smart recovery, 12-step recovery, alumni support, even the groups in Sanctuary Lodge, local service support, it's all groups of people supporting other people and helping each other. because together we're strong, by ourselves I'm very weak.
Absolutely. And when you see a magic come alive with the group, it's like a domino effect. It can take a group down as well, but it can also lift a group up that's so strong. And just seeing them open up and share, because a lot of people coming into treatment, the last time they sat in a group, was at school, and still they were being spoken to. They weren't, it wasn't like an open circle. So for a lot of them it's nerve-wracking and it's really, really scary, but actually it really helps them for when they do leave to continue to go to meetings, to continue to be in a group of people and know it's okay not to be loud, it's okay to be quiet, it's okay to be both loud and happy, and it's just giving them permission that says, look, you still don't have to get on with everyone, but it's about having that healthy respect for each other that just says there's a reason that you're all here together.
Yeah. Yeah, I meet a lot of people in recovery that I don't like, I'll be honest with you. But I love every one of them, and I would help anyone that if they asked me. I really would. And it really is the ethos, isn't it, of what we try and do, support one another, so we can stay clean together. Because really, it's an addict in their own company is in the worst company. Don't go up there without an adult, isn't it? I think I've heard said.
Yeah, 100%. And it's about really being proud of yourself to say that, actually, it was, because sometimes it's not their decision to necessarily that gets them through the door, but hopefully by the time they leave, they're doing it for themselves, because they're starting to find themselves again.
Yeah, you hear it a lot actually doing the job I do on admissions when I speak to people who we're going to be booking into treatment, or even just people who are phoning us up and saying, I can't come into treatment, I don't have the money for that, but is there anywhere I can go to seek help locally? So we will obviously talk to them about local support groups. I will always mention the fellowships, local support, sort of community drug and alcohol team, but a lot of people believe it's a failure. I hear it so much, well, I failed. And I say, no, you've got to flip that around on its head. You could just sit there not acknowledging this as a problem, but you've identified it and you've made the really brave decision to actually phone someone and do something about it. And that isn't a failure. That's I think the strongest thing you can do, and the bravest thing you can do is actually own it and say, I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to change.
And you hit it on the nail, that word failure, that's exactly the way that a lot of them feel when they're coming out of treatment as well, because they've been in treatment now for however many days, 28 is our average program, they should be coming out fixed and they shouldn't need any more support, and, so to still need to go to these meetings or to still need to check in with aftercare on a Friday, becomes like, well, I'm still a failure, I'm still not good enough, and actually it's about, no, it's just saying that everyone needs a little bit of support. So the very thing that they have at the beginning is still often the myth that they can walk out with, because sometimes other people's expectations of them can be, but you've been in there, you've had all the treatment, why is it still a problem? And this is because it's a lifelong illness. It's not a short-term illness. It is long-term. It doesn't go. It just becomes manageable.
Yeah, it does. You can learn to manage it, and I think after a while it isn't so much for me. Certainly it isn't about going to pick up a drink or a drug today, because it hasn't been like that for quite a long time. It's now about feelings and emotions that, like you said earlier, I'm very young in terms of I'm only, well, I was going to say 6.5, but that makes me sound even younger. But I've been clean for over 6 years. It's like a
6.5-year-old trying to negotiate with a 6.5-year-old that's going.
Yeah.
How we can get around this and say that, but actually emotionally that's how we can come across, we often respond like that 6-year-old that's kind of, if you think about a 6-year-old that's really excited for life, they're curious, but they're also kind of like, they're stepping into that stage where you're going to school for the first time and you want to be grown up, and so actually when you look at it, a lot of those behaviours come across like that. And it is just, it's not about trying to minimize anyone or take away what someone's achieved in life or been able to do. This is about saying emotionally you are like a 6-year-old. That doesn't mean that you can't still look after your family. That doesn't mean you haven't got a successful business or career or any of those things. They're practical things.
Yeah, I agree. I can, and I think a lot of people can. I see in recovery, I can react sometimes very immaturely, and I don't necessarily have the tools for everything that life's going to throw at me. But I do. I have children. I have grandchildren. I turn up to work every day on time. I'd like to think I'm a good employee. I'm a good husband and a good father, but I still sometimes can fall into that reaction of a lot younger than what I should be, because I haven't matured like other people have matured through their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just about having that acceptance, isn't it? And it's about not wanting to try and rush to change it. I use the Serenity Prayer a lot, and I always think that the biggest kind of thing about it is that wisdom to know the difference. There are things that we can change and we can't, and we can know that, but actually it's the wisdom to know when to do those and when not to, and actually that comes down to your emotional growth. Because sometimes when people get into recovery, they want to get into the fast lane again, and they want to go at 100 miles, and that's just not healthy. And actually we need to find what's healthy for you.
No, very true. Very true. Now, we have all different types of people from all different backgrounds coming through our services, and in general we're going to be approaching many resources for recovery. So in your experience of seeing people come through, particularly women, when they leave treatment, what would you say are some of the most challenging experience facing women compared to men when they leave treatment, and what can they do to actually help themselves?
I think it sounds like a cliche, but it is the same old kind of stereotypes and stigma that's in place. The female needs to be the mother and the nurturing and look after everyone, and all of that needs to come before themselves, and sometimes that's kind of the harder thing. Sometimes as well, there's less. Even with the fellowships, there's less 12-step female groups. There's less sometimes females in the fellowship. Some of the groups can be quite male-dominated, so that can sometimes be harder for females to find a group that they're comfortable in. But they are out there, and it does happen. I've got a client recently, and she's only 19, but she's found two female groups that she goes to, and she's really thrives off those and stuff, and she needs those for her personal reasons, just to kind of, until she gains more confidence in herself. But men equally can feel like they've got to put everyone else first, and actually we say anything you put before you and your recovery, you're going to lose. Yeah. So if you put family before it, you're going to lose them. If you put your job before it, you're going to lose them. We hear so many clients say, female or male, that if I don't go back to work, I'm going to lose this job or something. And it's like, but actually you're going to lose it anyway, because your addiction's going to come in and take it from you. So it's just really, really important. But it really varies from everyone. And like you say, everyone comes from different walks of life with different challenges and different experiences, and it's not about comparing those. It's just about being aware of them and actually what's going to work best for you. Yeah,
that's a very sensible and measured answer, I think. And you're right. I've sat in groups before. I remember one particular stands out where I'd done a share in a meeting about 3 years ago, and there was probably 30 people in there, and only one woman was in there, and it was her first meeting, and I can't even imagine what that experience must have been like for her, to sit down in a room full of men, her first ever experience of the fellowship. Yeah. It must have been very difficult for her. But then I've sat in a meeting in St Albans. I went to a meeting there and shared, and there was probably 30 women in there, and they were all crocheting. And I felt like out of place. It was one of the lunchtime meetings. I thought they're not going to identify with my story at all. But
yeah, no.
People are going to face their own challenges, male or female, I think, when they leave, and it's finding what works. Women will find groups. There are a lot of female-only groups. There are a lot that are running, and more are popping up. More and more are coming up on Zoom as well. I'm seeing, because the way the world is at the moment, everything's being done on Zoom. So there are a lot of female-only groups. There's also a lot of male groups as well. There's a male group on Sunday morning, not far from Sanctuary Lodge actually, where, believe it or not, we talk about totally different things than we would do usually in a mixed meeting. We're really getting in contact with feelings there. It's quite strange actually, a group of guys sitting around talking like that. But it's good for, you know, male and female to be able to separate and sort of talk about things they don't feel comfortable talking about in front of the opposite sex.
And I think it's about saying that that's okay, because we do exactly the same in groups. Sometimes when we notice that dynamic, you know, we'll separate it, and for group therapy, we'll have a separate group therapy session for the males and a separate one for the females, just if we notice that there's some different things coming up at that point, because sometimes it is needed. You know, it's not about trying to say men suffer more than females, or females suffer more than males. It's not about that. It's just about acknowledging that actually sometimes we all need a different space. Yeah,
very true. And thank you. And what would be probably your one word of advice, or the best advice you could give somebody who's listening to this, who's struggling?
I think that I would say, do you know what, if you're being honest with yourself, you already know something's going on, because you know you're struggling. So that's such an important thing to recognise. You know, we can minimise that, but actually if you're already making those steps without realising, and I think what I would just say is reach out to, you know, to a helpline, reach out to a service, reach out to the fellowship. It's just really, really important. Once you pick up that phone, it doesn't matter what you say, something will come out, and eventually, hopefully, that other person on the other end of the phone or face-to-face will help you make sense of it.
Yeah. It'd be the best, for me, the best thing you can do. And one of the things that sort of kept me going in my early recovery is I didn't see somebody like myself ever getting clean, much less staying clean. It wasn't for people like me. I sort of resigned myself in the end that it was going to kill me. Yeah. And they just said to me, you know, give it 6 months. Do what we show you to do for 6 months. Then if you want to use that pain and misery and suffering, that's still waiting there for you, Lee. And and it was true. After 6 months, after even a little while, it got a lot better, and life continues to get better. It's a journey of discovery, and if there is anyone listening that's not sure, you know, give someone a call, reach out. It will be the bravest thing you can ever do. Well, Jenna, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's really encouraged me, to be honest, and I think that, you know, because I'm not going to get abroad this year, I might have a couple of weeks in Sanctuary to come along and just do a bit of good work on myself.
Anytime, more than welcome. I sometimes think about giving myself a couple of weeks in Sanctuary as well, and just stepping out of the office and into a room, you know, because I think we all need it, you know. And, you know, the ethos of Sanctuary as well is work as a team. No one is greater or better than anyone else. That's how we work, and that's what the message that we try to pass on to the clients as well. Yeah.
Thank you for, you know, all the work you do. I know you guys and yourself do a fantastic job there. So, thank you for listening to Screaming on the Inside with our special guest Jenna from Sanctuary Lodge. You can find our podcast on all audio platforms. Simply search Screaming on the Inside, a podcast by UCAT. We'd also love to hear your suggestions and topic ideas. If you'd like to feature on an episode or share your experience, you can email us at sotipod@ucat.co.uk. Well, Jenna, thank you.
You're welcome.